Our next paper is by Samuel Bordley, Domenico Bruschi in the Sala Regia in the Biblioteca dei Lincei e Corsiniano. Sam.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to be bringing a couple things together, so stay with me here. In 1885, Italian painter Domenico Bruschi decorated the ceiling of the Lincei Library with allegorical personifications of the sciences. Since then, historians and critics alike have debated the work's aesthetic merit and have disagreed about what style is evident. Where does his style come from? What could we call it? And, if possible, why is this style important? The high decorated ceiling of the Lincei Libraries features 10 allegorical female figures, each representing fields of scientific study. These monumental figures are rendered with a stark frontal dignity and stare down from their perches on the students of the library. The figures are all set off by a glowing gold leaf background. Spirited putti dance across the ceiling carrying scrolls of poetry and symbolic objects. To introduce the ambiguity of our academic protagonist, Bruschi claimed in a speech that, quote, studious artists don't produce large papers, grand canvases, or labor over copies. He advised students not to copy, but to truly incorporate a study of the classics. He wrote in a letter that, quote, I adore and study the classics for their sentiment, without, however, imitating them crudely. Rather, they inspire to make me as original as I can, without leaving the circle of classical inquiry. As we will see, Bruschi's studies incorporated a great deal and made him original in the process. The English painter Frederick Leighton is, I will argue, key to understanding Domenico Bruschi. Expressing a similar sentiment to Bruschi, Leighton, pondering the nature of modern art, said, quote, we are the children of our time. We could not, if we could close our hearts to the questions which arise within us. We must face them. We must seek to answer them. As we will see, Bruschi was no escapist either, but remained socially and politically active throughout his life. Bruschi said that he first saw the work of Frederick Leighton at the World's Fair in London in 1862. Bruschi spoke at length about the strengths of Leighton's Cimabue, calling Leighton a genius of English art, and in particular, the thorough historicizing costumes and atmosphere that Leighton captured in his depiction of the 14th century Florentines. In response to this painting, Bruschi paid tribute with his numerous frescoes in the Piazza della Provincia in Perugia. Compare Leighton's Cimabue with Bruschi's depiction of the Perugian artists of the same period. Like Leighton, Bruschi has arranged his figures within a marble frieze-like enclosure. Over a pale wall is a limited landscape, mostly cypress trees that interrupt the light blue skyline. The streaky horizontal clouds and the noonday sunlight are other borrowed motifs. Bruschi also named Leighton's mosaic work in the South Kensington Museum as being an admirable English contribution to the fine arts. Bruschi said that the Kensington figures are, quote, perfect in character, tonality, and design. Here, a direct reference can be seen in Bruschi's own work in the Lincei Library by his use of single figures surrounded by gold. Bruschi had even paid tribute to this format once before in the Crocifisso Chapel, where he made the background of his decorations a faux gold mosaic. As we can see here, these are painted tesserae. They are not, in fact, mosaics. Bruschi's painting La Sorgente, or the source, the spring, caused a minor scandal in Rome in 1899. The painting was judged by many to be vulgar and disrespectful to the canons of human figure. Period and contemporary critics have disagreed about the inspiration for this figure, maintaining that it responds to Costa's Nymph in a Wood, shown here, or Edward Poynter's Andromeda, also shown here, or even Ang's painting of the same title, The Source, shown here. They're all, close enough. But I would like to point out that in his 1896 speech, Bruschi describes specifically admiring Frederick Leighton's Bath of Psyche. It was not named explicitly, but Bruschi was very struck by, quote, a figure of a Greek woman, nude, in the act of covering herself with a white drape, with two Ionic columns in the background. Bruschi's figure, from the source, has nearly this exact posture, and seems to be yet another homage to the English aestheticist Frederick Leighton. Notice the hand pulled in close to the face, and the engaged right leg and the unengaged left leg. Italian historian Alessandra Migliorati claims that Domenico Bruschi, Nino Costa, and Gabriele D'Annunzio were particularly responsible for the aestheticism in Rome during the end of the century. Rome during the 1880s was even called Byzantina to draw attention to the decadence of the city. Some of the Anglo-inspired artists surrounding D'Annunzio were students of Bruschi. One such student, Giuseppe Cellini, decorated the Galleria Sciarra in Rome with a fully Victorian program just 1 year after the completion of the Leutze library. Bruschi's seated allegories that we saw before in gold, in the hands of his student Cellini, had completed their transformation into genuinely British muses. Changing directions drastically. Pietro Vannucci, called Perugino, took his name for the hometown of Perugia. Because Domenico Bruschi was also born and raised in Perugia, he began in his early years with a fully Perugino-inspired visual language in the Basilica of San Pietro in Perugia. There in the Chapel of San Giuseppe, Bruschi painted allegorical figures with a wide, oval-shaped heads. Like Perugino, all of the facial features have been reduced in size. Notice how the small, pursed mouth is all but borrowed wholesale. Even the lowered eyelids contribute to the dreamy charm of the Perugino manner. This is a plaque seen in Perugia, near where Catherine and I lived. Domenico Bruschi was an artist, but also an active patriot. Even as a young man, he participated in the liberation of Perugia from under papal rule by his father's side, who was a celebrated military leader. 6 years later, Bruschi volunteered in Trentino with the Garibaldini. This risorgimento brought about what is called the Neo-Renaissance. Generalizing here. After the unification of Italy, both King Vittorio Emanuele and Pope Pius IX were attempting to transform Baroque Rome into a modern European capital. For these leaders, this took the form of re-glorifying ancient Rome and the achievements of the Renaissance. Rome was nicknamed Terza Roma. A lot of pressure. Politicians such as Quintino Sella insisted that Rome become the, quote, symbol of the entire national ideal. An ancient Roman and Renaissance vocabulary was used as the premier expression of the national spirit and of Italianità. Towards this definition, a guida per I giovani, or a guide for the youth, was compiled by Romeo Palazzi and Domenico Bruschi to teach the youth of Italy the methods of fine art in this new nation. Approved in 1883, remember the dates, by King Umberto I and the Ministry of Public Instruction, Bruschi also gave a speech about the achievements of painting in the Italian Renaissance in 1885. This lies at the basis of what historian Caterina Bonvalassina called the, quote, national style. Bruschi was an important exponent of this Renaissance revival. In the art of Raphael, Michelangelo, and Leonardo, Bruschi claimed that these artists had exceeded their 14th century predecessors in design and color. And revisiting Bruschi's work from the Palazzo della Provincia, we can see that the homage to Raphael is also readily apparent. The groupings in a staircase, the pastiche of historical figures, and the vibrant primary colors recall the school of Athens. But one of the most significant predecessors had to have been Raphael's depiction of the prophet Isaiah in the Basilica of San Agostino in Rome. The figure is seated on a marble throne and accompanied with two putti who grapple happily with garlands and a plaque. The covered headdress, the splayed positioning of the legs, one forward, one back, and the scroll are borrowed heavily by Bruschi for the Leutze decorations, particularly for his figure of geography seen here. Domenico Bruschi met the painter Nino Costa, Giovanni Costa, called Nino Costa, in 1870, becoming lifelong friends, and from this time Bruschi was devoted to Costa's theories. Costa later organized performing groups such as the Circle of Italian Artists, including Domenico Bruschi, and like Bruschi, Costa had many Anglo-Saxon connections and was also close friends with Frederick Leighton. And so Costa, Frederick Leighton, and Domenico Bruschi spent several summers together in Umbria during the 1870s. In 1882, Costa founded the celebrated Scuola Etrusca, and so during the period of preparation for the Leutze Library, 1883, Domenico Bruschi was surrounded by a flock of international painters. Also in the year of 1883, at the International Exposition in Rome, the works of Sir Lawrence Alma-Tadema and Giulio Sartorio made a popular splash, enthusiastically supported by both Nino Costa and Gabriele D'Annunzio. Tadema's decadent classicism, not to mention a love for painting marble, can also be seen in Bruschi's paintings in the Leutze, and of course at the 1883 exhibition were paintings by Frederick Leighton. Finally, in this fateful year of 1883, the Lince began the renovations of Palazzo Corsini and commissioned Bruschi to paint the library ceiling with allegorical figures. These 10 figures represent the scientific disciplines of the Lince. Let's take a look at just 4 of them. These 2 figures, for example, history and archaeology, look towards each other and complete the meditative and active sides of historical practice, respectively. On the right side, the active figure of archaeology stands and gestures towards the ground in the physical realm, while on the left, history sits thoughtfully and records the observations of archaeology. On the left side of the panel is a quote from Machiavelli that reads, quote, "The future examines past events to foresee and to facilitate what to do." The quote on the right is in Latin, perhaps from Cicero, quote, "Is there anyone, moreover, whom antiquity, as both witness to and having been established by the most famous monuments, does not move?" In each allegory, the text, or the text on the scrolls, clarifies the theme in question. This figure of zoology, holds out a hand to pacify a coiled snake, and with the other writes in a book which sits on her lap. This is one figure whose iconography has been widely disagreed upon. They've all been kind of disagreed upon. The scholars who have worked on this are very confused. There survive 2 preparatory drawings for this figure. Problematically, the historians are confused for good reason. Problematically, in one of the drawings, the figure is labeled by Bruschi himself as La Medicina, and he even wrote on the paper that the figure was destined for the Lince in Rome. The other preparatory drawing brought to the light by the 1997 exhibition, 100 Drawings from the Academy of Perugia, also identified the figure as medicine. It is my opinion that the confusion is a result of the coiled snake, also, which happens to perhaps intend to represent the medicinal rod of Asclepius. However, because the contract called for a figure of zoology, and the figure is ultimately flanked by 2 zoologists, I maintain that the figure represents zoology and not medicine. Mathematics. This figure likely comes closest to the, quote, "noble simplicity and calm grandeur requisite of Winckelmann's classicism." Her weighty, meditative posture is particularly grave. And in fact, this figure was developed from 2 earlier depictions of Melpomene, the muse of tragedy, seen in the Verdi and Spoleto theaters from some years earlier. Apparently, Bruschi had assessed the thoughtful posture to be most appropriate for the seriousness of mathematics. The hem of this figure's robe is decorated with various mathematical symbols. There are Easter eggs like this all throughout the program. The figure of physics holds an air pump coiled with copper wire, and the robes of the figure display very small writing along the hem, illegible without the use of binoculars, that reads, quote, "To Amalia, the well-esteemed daughter, painted and adorned with love by her father." The quote on the scroll, one from Leonardo da Vinci, reads, "Experience never fails, rather only our judgments of our experiences fail." This chosen sentiment prefigures the scientific method nicely. The figure of physics in the Lince was taken from an earlier figure of Italia from the theater in Terni. Like many of the figures from Terni, Italia has a certain Pompeian charm and delicacy. The eyes are large and the mouth is a smiling rosebud. This is appropriate in a theater setting, but when the figure was to be used in the Lince, it became consequentially more monumental and somber. Now, in 1997, there was an exhibition that featured drawings by Bruschi, and even the show's curators seemingly could not refrain from making condescending remarks about the Lince decorations. Quote, "Bruschi seems to have followed the artistic recipe forged in the halls of the Academy, very professional and irreproachable performer, that followed the fashion of the moment. Bruschi found pleasure in colors and in subject, in elegance of pose, and in the fineness of every particular, the easiest means to obtain for himself vast consensus. The hall, anyways, is not without a certain charm, which was part of its time." So condescending. Yet in 1885, apparently the works in the Lince found, quote, "such popularity among both artists and the press that Bruschi was awarded the title of Commendatore to the Crown of Italy. The ceremony for Bruschi's nomination was even held in the Lince library beneath his own decorations. Today, Bruschi remains just as divisive. To some he was thrilling, and to others he was forgettable and kitsch. Bruschi claimed in a speech delivered in 1885 that the studied artist is characterized by the use of little macchiette of color, marks or splotches. Only very rarely did Bruschi use a pure white in the Lince decorations. Rather, what first looks like a white is actually a lilac, a warm pink, or a subtle ultramarine. Look, for example, at the reflective drapery of Physics shown here. Each shimmer of light is a flat, square stroke of pure Naples yellow, laid in with studied surety. In 5 of the 10 figures, the color of the robe is placed immediately next to the opposite color on the color wheel, clashing and balancing orange with blue, for example here in Physics, or red with green, contributes to the energetic impressions of color pervasive in the decorations. Bruschi's Lince decorations, this is the tricky part, have been called neo-Renaissance, purist, hybrid Victorian, realist, classical academic, aestheticist, and pre-Raphaelite. I propose that the most productive classification is neo-Cinquecentismo, or neo-1500s-ism. The figures are more engaging and elastic than any genuinely classical standard would allow. The direct eye contact of figures such as mathematics and physics, not to mention the dancing putti, are a far cry from the still friezes of canonical neoclassicism. Rather, the traditional conception of artistic progress affirmed in Bruschi's 1896 speech, Thoughts on Renaissance Painting, finds expression in a specifically 16th century treatment. Bruschi's close relationship with continental art movements came from his travel and his circle of artistic peers. The French academic influence is readily apparent. The crystalline drawing, the reduction of artifice, and the ancient and Renaissance visual vocabulary are all byproducts of the preceding generation of neoclassicists. However, Bruschi did not relinquish his Italic roots. The enthroned monumental women are descendants of the Sistine Chapel Sibyls and Raphael's prophet Isaiah. Furthermore, his use of gold leaf recalls early Renaissance works like Cimabue or Giotto's enthroned Madonna. And lastly, striking similarities can also be seen in Leighton's aestheticism and the modern mosaic work in the South Kensington Museum. The rescue of academic artists such as Domenico Bruschi would take multiple forms. First among them would be the recovery of lost truth. For Bruschi, it would mean the recognition of his former fame, acknowledgement of his modernist proclivity, and a more nuanced understanding of Italian nationalism. Bruschi could indeed be saved from neglect by further aggrandizing his connection with the avant-garde, but what would be more appropriate would be to his career, would be to acknowledge the modernist aspects of some academic practice. These decorations stand as a historical monument marking the evolution of both modern and academic art, and not the doldrums in between. What is usually dismissed as a surplus of uninspired technical proficiency is in fact the very capacity that allowed Bruschi to fully express various notable styles during his career. He proved able to maneuver between several 19th century movements, demonstrating that academic practice is far from formulaic. And in doing so, he gave us a nuanced expression of Rome in the 19th century that equals the very heights that it celebrates.
when we look at these images, we can't not agree with you that there's something that we just can't call academic about them, or that we have to reimagine what we mean when we say academic. That I think at bottom what you're telling us is that academic painting is anyway a part of its time, like Leighton said. And these are so full of academic elements, and yet they're so much of the 1880s. There's something about them which is a little bit hard to pin down, but it comes out in these different influences that you suggest are a part of what makes this image. But I think also the different people that you cite can't pin it down either, right? The way that they can't seem to figure out what they're looking at, I think is really very telling.
It comes through in the scholarship, really, that everybody calls it something different.
But and because they are a little bit strange. I mean, what do we make of those, I'm sorry, simpering expressions on most of their faces?
The question is still open. Yes.
Other questions from audience? I actually have one about the theater in Terni. I should have gotten it by now because this is the second time I've heard some version of this talk, but when was that period, and is it Bruschi?
Yeah.
Because it looks so different.
It does.
It's completely and utterly different. When did he do that?
He did that in 1883, I believe.
And here we're in
1880. So this began in 1883 and finished in 1885.
And so
Excuse me, 1882, I think, was the one in Terni.
So they're contiguous in time.
Very much so.
And they're completely different.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the reproductions that.
No, I mean, I'm sure that's part of it. I think part of it, though, is that they do look very different. Something that I talk a little bit more about in my thesis is that his academic training is what allowed him to have so many different styles, where when he begins in this sort of Perugino style, and then that becomes this sort of purist style, which he got from a lot of his teachers, and then we have this very full expression of the Neo-Renaissance, or whatever we want to call it. And then he goes into this fully sort of decadent style in his late career that is private commissions that are completely, I don't want to say impious and pretend to be pious or whatever, but there's liberal nudity and zero gravity folly, and he really does have his technical ability, I think, allowed him to express loads of different styles. It's very, like Georgie said, difficult to pin down.
Well, I think that was what made your talk so fascinating to me, and this time it came out much more than we did it a couple of weeks ago with Loki, but that is that you brought together all these different elements. You can see him looking around, knowing all these different options, let's say, and somehow drawing upon them, making use of them, possibly. You've identified points of reference that I found very credible. There's something that really strikes me about the faces, and that is that even though I certainly see the neo-cinquecentesimo, as you're calling it, in them in the poses, in particular in the idea of a personification seated, turning, and so forth, the facial types seem to be really out of left field to me, and they almost look like paintings of, Neapolitan peasants or something. I mean, I'm just inventing here. I don't know painting this very well, but I think of more, how to put it, very modern painting, but in the facial types, even though the expressions may be a little simpering, as you say.
I agree with Georgie. It's a very 19th century handling of these big dark set eyes and this sort of hyper-specific sweetness.
I mean, whatever we make of these aesthetically, I personally love them. I think they're gorgeous. So I agree with Sam wholeheartedly there. But whatever we make of it, I think is a document of what people were trying to, how in the period of the Risorgimento and immediate aftermath, there's an attempt to create Italian identity through everything you got at your disposal, including important commissions like this for public buildings. And how do you do that? What does that mean in a country that didn't exist until yesterday? and yet which has this incredibly rich pictorial tradition. And I think you've done a nice job of thinking about this. Really.
So yeah, it's a very specific moment, and it's gone in a flash.
Any other questions?
Are there any records about the patrons, I guess the Leutze Academy themselves? I mean, what were they giving him any direction or?
Yeah, so they had basically in the contract that's in the archives at the Capitolino, they have a contract that basically states that for whatever reasons, basically they're personifications of the different subjects taught at the Leutze, and it's the Leutze who's funding a full-scale renovation, not wholesale, but a big renovation of the Palazzo Corsini across the street, and this is just one part of it. But really the scholarship does not go into it, but the available primary documents, they don't provide any reasons for it, I think just beyond representation and sort of what I was getting about at the New Renaissance and sort of what Lila alluded to, that the best way to maybe unify a brand new country is to sort of hold up what has worked before, like what we can achieve with collective patronage and a sort of shared value, a shared cultural value that we can agree that that was great, can we do it again? So I think that came together, and what I get around to in my thesis, I think, but I didn't have time to mention, was that the Guida per I Giovani, also, which was approved by the government and approved by the king, these documents that we have were also signed off by the king. So these are very much, you know, these are what the government has allowed, very explicitly. It's very interesting.
Is that where the quotes at the beginning of your talk were from, where you're talking about Bruschi studying classics for their sentiment?
That was in a speech that he actually gave in Perugia. Yeah, but it's a very similar moment. Yeah, so when we're searching for a shared identity, I don't think it's any coincidence that that's when he gives a speech on the strengths of the Italian Renaissance. Yeah, it's an important point.
Any other questions?
Sam, conoscevi Bruschi prima del tuo soggiorno a Perugia?
Sì, abbastanza, ma da questo anno sì, il prossimo no. Io conosco che lui era un perugino e ci sono tante opere in Perugia ancora di Bruschi nell'Accademia delle Belle Arti, ma in Roma è abbastanza scarso.
Infatti mi chiedevo proprio quale fosse il suo livello di conoscenza e di, anche al di fuori dell'Italia, se tu mi avevi sentito parlare oppure è solo dopo che sei venuto in Italia. Mi chiedevo se è un pittore famoso oppure se è solo molto locale.
È difficile per dire.
Roma?
In Roma sì, certo, durante questo periodo, ma fuori di questo abbastanza in Londra, perché lui abitava là per 6 anni nella giovinezza, ma in Perugia lui è famosissimo, ancora abbastanza, perché il Ranieri Sorvello conoscevo Bruschi prima di io. E ancora tanti storici, loro sono perugini, ma mai romani.
Certo.
Sì.
Migliorati mancini.
Sì.
Grazie.